the person is asking me how to make tea. I came here for a technical interview. At that point of time, I asked Leon, like, Leon, what's this fascination with this question? Like, you hire people for a technical job and you ask them how to make tea.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Relevant Insights, where we talk with interesting hiring managers, entrepreneurs, and just executives who have amazing careers that they've designed in the international markets. And today we have a great guest here with us. His name is Anirban. And he is actually an individual that I've worked with for many years. I hired him on at Evernote. Actually, he was at Evernote before I got there. And then I actually ended up rehiring him onto the Evernote team to do something totally different than he was originally doing. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But he has amazing stories about working for a global company out of India is where he's located. He's located in Delhi. And obviously we have Nadia on with us as well today. And I'll put up our logo here really quick. Relevant. We are the company that does 21-day challenges to help global professionals upskill and get those international jobs that they're after. So that's what we're doing here. And Relevant Insights, this podcast, is for all of us to get interesting insights from interesting people like Anirban. So with that, let's get started. Welcome, Anirban. Thanks for joining us from India. How's it going?
Things are tough, but again, we all are doing our best to survive. So I think thanks for calling me. I think this is going to be exciting.
Yeah.
But how did your work life change during the COVID? You already mentioned that like it became more virtual, of course, rather than personal, maybe something else.
So I think initially when I was working with all the international team, it was already virtual. But on daily basis, I also meet people locally as well, where I have to travel for an hour or half an hour. Maybe they are coming to my office or I'm visiting that. So I think once that changed, I think first 2-3 months you feel good about it because you don't have to get ready in the morning, take a cab, visit somebody. But I think after 3-4 months, it hits you because you're not seeing anybody. You're not seeing the surrounding changing. So I think those kind of things affects you, not personally, but I think work-wise also, because when you go out, you meet interesting people, you hear new things, and those kind of things you try to implement in a new conversation. Like you are taking a cab, you're meeting a new guy, you're understanding how his life is going, and then you meet somebody. So I think that way it affected a lot where the discussions were too much on point. Like you need something, this is what you get, and that's the discussion ends. But when you are meeting somebody in person, it's more on what are you doing? Like, are you married? Are you going around? What new thing did you eat? Did you visit some places? So the conversations are much more apart from the actual conversation that is supposed to be there. So like currently we are talking about what an individual can do internationally, COVID wise, this and that. So we are talking on the points. But if we would be having in a room, I think we would spend time on talking about, okay, that's a nice t-shirt maybe.
Yeah.
Where did you buy it from? So maybe the discussion.
So kind of the small talk, right? Like
yeah.
The small talk kind of building that relationship kind of stuff has gone a little bit away, and it's more just to the point. Yeah, which I think there's positives and negatives to that, obviously. But the building of relationships, I agree, is something that I feel is lacking now. It's more difficult to really build a relationship, especially what I do. I do a lot of partnerships and business development and stuff like that. And that's critical. And I know you do a lot of that. Yeah. So COVID has definitely changed everything. And I think we're all learning how to operate in a different way and make it work. A question for you, just going back to your career. Oh, wait, we've got Fyodor here coming in, I think. Hey, Fyodor, I just added you.
Hi, guys.
Oh, wow.
All right.
I was backstage listening for a while, and then I'm like, will they?
Well, I didn't want to, I was wondering what the right time to bring Fyodor in was, and luckily you popped on, and it was perfect. So thanks for joining. Fyodor is my co-founder in Relevant in New York. Hails from St. Petersburg, Russia, originally.
Nice.
And Nadia, where do you hail from originally? Where in Russia?
Actually, Vladivostok, which is eastern part of Russia, close to China and Japan.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
Mhm.
Very cool. Very cool. Russia's big, India's
So
big,
it's
Russian.
huge.
America's big, and China's big, right? Like we come from all these countries where just absolutely gigantic.
But the
So,
world, Troy, but the world is really small. That's
but
the
the
thing.
world
That's
is
the
very small.
I
paradox.
You're
agree.
absolutely right. That's totally true. So Anirban, I want to jump into your career because it's an interesting career, and you are working for Evernote. You've worked for Evernote. How many years are you at right now with an international firm like Evernote?
I joined Evernote in April of 2010, and I have been
Wow.
with them since then. So I
Yeah.
think it's 2021. Yeah, so good 11, 12 years.
So talk to me about you intimated earlier about some different cultural nuances that when you
Mhm.
get a job with an international company, regardless of where you are, if you're in Russia, India, China, wherever you are, you have to kind of understand how to navigate the cultural differences between your culture and the
Mhm.
culture in which you're working with people. So tell us a little bit about that transition. Like, how did that work for you? And what things did you need to learn in
Mhm.
order to operate effectively in a truly global company?
So I think previously when you work for Indian organization, the kind of relationship that we have with like a boss and a colleague, it's more like the boss is the king. He might call you at all hours. He might ask you for things that you might not understand, but you will use your brain, your knowledge of whatever you want, and then you will somehow deliver it. So I think that kind of experience, when you join an international firm, you bring that experience with you, and you expect that your boss to give you the instructions or what you want to do. You are always trying to please him around. But I think by the time you start working with all these folks internationally, you understand that everybody is at an equal stage, and the kind of work that you do, you have the openness of what you want to bring to the table. It's not that your ideas would be undermined because the boss has a better experience, he knows everything. So the good part is you have a say in there. Like, you have a crazy idea, you can bring it on, people are going to discuss about it, and that somehow builds a lot of confidence in you. Because usually in a normal setup, I think you bring in your idea, your boss might take something from it, then he might formulate something of it and then present it by himself. So it's more like
Yeah,
top down.
that's always
But
frustrating, right?
yeah, that's always frustrating. But again, when you stay in that kind of environment, you kind of get used to it and you accept it as a normal day-to-day thing. It's like, okay, bosses are like this, and this is how things operate. But then you see something new, and then you start double guessing things like, is this the right way of doing things? So I think initial 4 or 5 months, these are the kind of things that I think, as an Indian who has worked for Indian companies and suddenly switches to an international boss, an international organization, I think these actually affect you in a different way. And apart from that, I think although we speak English, everybody speak English, but at the end of the day, you do have a native tongue as well. And in the
Mhm.
back of the head, at times you are thinking in English, but those words are formatting after with your native language. So it's not the literal translations that you do. And at times that creates confusion because I might be speaking English, but the thought process in my head is in my native language that I'm trying to formulate and then translate and give it to you. So
Hey,
I
well,
think
let me
at
let
times,
me just say, Nadia and Fyodor, do you resonate with that? Like, is that kind of an experience you've had?
I
I
think
think you're
Theodore,
on.
you're
I
on
think you're
mute.
on mute, Fyodor.
Well, Flutter is muted. Yeah, I can start. I mean, in the beginning, I felt when I just started working in the US, it felt like this way. Yeah, but then you kind of start thinking in English. Yeah, which
Yeah.
is like a huge progress that I can feel. Yeah, but of course, sometimes I still, have it, keep it in my mind. Okay, all these phrases, and then I just translate it. Yeah, in my head. So it's kind of like also a job, to
Right.
Yeah,
to
guys, what
communicate.
I wanted to say is on top of that, the kind of the words and phrases and all the reality, accent is another thing that we as non-native speakers really, and I wanted to say we as non-native speakers, but maybe native speakers, I should say, have to deal with a lot, because
Right.
they, they really like they are so most of the time so welcome and opening and saying no, it's not a big deal, but actually having personal relationship, I see that it is actually oftentimes a big deal, and it is hard to understand us, and so kind of acknowledging it, yeah, and also maybe if you are an international professional, there are actually simple exercises that we all can do to kind of will never sound as native speakers, but at least to reduce that and to be understandable. I think that's something that we all can be doing, and it's a kind of good thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. I know so many, just because of what I've done in the international markets. I know so many people that speak English as a second language, and my recommendation is exactly what you just said, Fyodor, is soften the accent, don't lose the accent. I get intensely irritated when people want to speak exactly native. The reason being is that's your spice. That's unique to you, and I love it. Like us native speakers, if you will, at least in the US, I think it adds more character and it makes you more interesting to have an accent. So soften it, yes. And really the goal, as Fyodor said, is to be understandable. Like I speak Korean, and one of the major milestones that I had to hit in Korean was just being able to be understood. So I worked intensely hard on my pronunciation, definitely not native in my sound, but people don't struggle to understand what I'm saying usually. So yeah, I think that's important. And Anirban, I really enjoy what you talked about there, because I have so much experience hiring people in many different countries. And I remember when I hired you, one of the things that I was really excited about is you weren't scared to question me as your boss. And this was something that I actually asked you proactively to do. And like anytime I've hired in India, Korea, all throughout Asia, even Latin America, I have to be very explicit that I don't know everything, right? Like, yes, I'm the boss, but I don't know everything. And if I tell you to do something, I remember how many times I tell people this, but if I tell you to do something and you don't agree or you don't think it's going to work, we have to have that conversation. I never want to be in a position where we go do something and after the fact I hear, yeah, well, that wasn't going to work because here in this country, that's not going to work, right? Like, but you made that transition, I think, brilliantly. And you and I developed a very deep and close relationship. I've been to your wedding. That was amazing. But why do you think people struggle with how can you help someone make that transition if they're in India or in a culture where questioning the boss is not encouraged or expected, but they're getting hired on to an international firm where the boss wants that? How would you recommend they do that?
So I will share my experience. So like we were saying, so apart from spoken English, I think the another level where we face a lot of problem is written English. Because I think we in India, from the starting, when we start our school, we are taught British English, which is more on the proper, where you are putting all the grammars and you are not just saying I'm going there. It has to be a complete sentence, like I woke up in the morning and I'm going there. It's like a huge sentences. So usually you write that kind of emails, and then the colleague who is on the other part of the world, he still says, okay, that's cool. And then you're thinking, what does that mean? Like I wrote a lengthy email and he's just saying that's cool. So I think those kind of things you learn with experience. I think that is something you need to learn. But coming back to your question, I think the way I understood that everybody is equal, regardless whether you might be reporting to him. He might be your manager, he might be your VP. Because initially what we did, I think you will remember this. So there was one thing that we initially did was during the review session, which was a quarterly review. So every quarter we did a review. And in the review, not only the boss reviews the employee also need to review the boss. And when
Right.
that questionnaire came, like everybody's thinking, like, how can I do that? Like, if I say something, he's going to take a grudge on me. Like, he's
Yeah.
not going to respond to my emails. Maybe my increment is going to hamper. He's going to think, oh, this is the guy who's pointing my mistakes. But then I think what Troy did was he explained, like, see, everybody has flaws, but unless and until you bring that to the table and you make me understand that I work in this way, but at times when I'm suggesting something, I take a little bit time because I have to formulate the plan. I have to tell you each and every detail, and you don't let me speak that. So at the end of the day, the goal is for everybody to grow together. It's just a single
Yeah.
guy cannot do. It's a team effort. So in a team, everybody is equal. So you need to get that opportunity to speak up. So I think that kind of attitude that Troy showed, and I think a little bit of learning of understanding that unless and until I say like this is the way I work, and if you could a little bow down to the way I work, I think it would be better for both of us to understand things in a much more different way. I think that kind of understanding made sense, and that is where I understood like, okay, a reverse feedback is required. Okay, like Troy, you don't let me complete my sentences. Let me do that because I have a different language and I'm going to speak this entirely. I'm going to take my time to speak this out. You might have a different idea, but I am coming from India. India is the market that I'm going to focus on. And I need to make you understand like that certain things will work in India and certain things won't because you might have heard it on Google, but that might not be true. So you need to give me that opportunity. You need to. So I think it's a process. It doesn't happen in a day. But I think as an individual who is trying, I think he has to be very much open or she has to be very much open to all these kind of changes where they need to come up as an open book and see, okay, for a certain amount of period, I have stayed in this country and I've done things in a way. And now I need to make sure that I learn their ways as well because that is how you can bring the transition together. So I think that is how I would like to sum it up.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great summary. And I eventually did let you finish some sentences, I'll say. but you make an extremely important point, which is this is something I've learned over the course of my career, especially when you're going international, is trust the people on the ground. I learned so much about India that I wouldn't have learned otherwise with me and you sitting in a taxi going to a meeting and me just asking, why are they doing that? Why is this person, and you were great at just helping me understand the culture. And because of that, we saw tremendous success in India and beyond, just because we truly understood the culture. But I think it's important for me as a hiring manager, right, to have employees that are, number one, thinking for themselves, and number two, communicating those thoughts to me so that I can actually process that information with you and then make some decisions and make some plans. So I think that's a big transition that people have to go through when they get an international job with a company that may be in a culture that's different than your native culture.
Yeah, I wanted to add that the feedback is the key of like in building good communication culture. I remember in the beginning when I just started my international career, my emails were really short, on point. And then my manager, he said to me that, that you are pretty rude in your emails, like
Yeah, it
with
sounds
with
rude.
the
Yeah.
people. And I'm like, oh my God, why? Yeah. And then I got that like American people appreciate small talks even in the emails. So I
Yeah. How are
started,
you
like,
doing?
hey,
Yeah,
how
like
was
that. Yeah.
how was your weekend? Yeah. And then like
Right.
the point, and then again, something nice. So yeah,
Yeah,
That's
to add
great.
that
to
is
that,
really
Pat,
helpful.
so to add to what Nadia said, I think initially what used to happen when I was new, like everybody used to say, okay, I hope you had a good weekend. What did you do? So at time, it's just a conversation which stays there. You do not need to respond to that always, unless and until you have that kind of connect. And I was like anybody who used to like drop me an email on Monday saying how did your weekend was. I used to like them a lengthy email saying, okay, I went there and this and that. Then one time,
Nice.
and, and then this one point, this guy says, Anirban, when we write, how was your weekend? It just ends there.
Yeah.
Either you say it was fine or you simply
You're
ask me
sending
like, how was,
pictures and videos.
yeah. And I'm like, I genuinely thought that you were actually interested in my life and what I did in the weekend. So I think those kind of jargons we need to learn where certain things are used there, but you're not
Yeah.
supposed to respond to that. Like
Right.
somebody walking up to you and say, how was your week? You say, okay, it was fine. You don't make it a half an hour long conversation explaining how exactly your week was.
Yeah, that's
So yeah,
funny.
I think those are like small things I think you learn. But yeah.
So, Anirban, tell us about your journey a little bit with Evernote specifically. Like, how did you first get hired? Because a lot of people watching this podcast want to get that international job and design their life around it, right? And I think you've done a fabulous job. I think you're living kind of a dream life in India, right? Like you're working for a Silicon Valley company, and you've got a lot of freedom. I mean, you just have kind of like a good thing going on. How did it all start? Let's go through kind of just the journey that you made to get onto Evernote.
Yeah, and before you start, like a small question. Out of the population in India, what is the percentage, do you think, of people that could have an international job, but actually kind of don't have it because they just don't think globally and don't allow themselves to do it? Like, do you think, is it a problem? I know in a lot of cultures, in Russia, for example, in Korea, we were talking with Troy, people don't even like consider for some reason that they are just like their thinking is limited to their local market and they miss the opportunities. Like, what's the situation in India? And then your personal story.
So I think I will start with what you asked. So I think it's an easy one, but I won't go a little lengthy on that. So usually when people in India, I think with the population and everything, it's always a competition because for every job there are going to be at least 50 applicants. So you have to be better than the other one. So with that kind of attitude, when you go with the international kind of, so it doesn't always work because India is more on what's your score for a certain exam, how much did you make for a certain. But when you speak to an international client, he might not ask about any terms in terms of your education. He might ask, okay, what have you done in your life? Have you traveled? What do you think you want to do in next 5 years? So those kind of things, I think it takes you back, and most of them don't think because they think if they're going to score well, most of the companies are going to take you. That is true at times because there are companies which are into that kind of things where they need the cream kind of the audience where you are top notch, your IQ is 200 and you are all good in that. But again, for most of the jobs, you need to be street smart, what you say. Like apart from what you're good at, you need to tackle around all the issues. For those, you need to have a difference. So I think those kind of things, most people don't think. And I think they should be thinking. Because most of the Indian, what they think is like, okay, I will do my bachelor's here in India. For master's, I will go out, and that is how I'm going to enter into the international market. There are very few people like me who would actually do their studies and suddenly they see an opportunity. Okay, let's apply for that. Maybe I will hit it. So I think that kind of chance is most people don't take because I think it has to do with multiple situations. Because as you know, with population, there is scarcity of things, there's scarcity of everything, then the money comes into picture, then you have family obligations. So I think that territory I won't go into because that's a tricky part and it's a lot that you can talk about. But to make a small comment on what you said, I think people should be thinking differently. They should be training differently. I think first they should know how to communicate. I think the rest will fall in place. If you're good in something, you will stay good in that. But unless until you communicate how you good are in that, I think that is important. Because unless and until I make you understand that I'm good in computers and I simply show you a certificate, okay, I see I got 100 in this, I got 100 in this, but you might never know that how good I'm actually if I don't communicate and tell you about instances where there was an issue and I solved it. So I think that is where people need to learn a bit more and focus more. rather than what they do now.
Now, Anirban, you're talking about some things, and Fyodor, thank you for asking this question, because you're actually talking about the root cause or root motivation for me in forming Relevant with Fyodor. Remember when we would go to the universities throughout India, and I would speak to the students, and remember the question that was always asked everywhere we went. I would open up to questions, and invariably someone would ask, Troy, how can we differentiate ourselves and get a good job? Yeah. And my answer was always the same. And actually it appears in our tagline here, the hashtag do things, right? Because it's not about the credentials and the paper that they're written on and that 100% test score. All of that goes away for a typical US company that's hiring you. We don't care. What can you do? What have you done? And I think that so many people get caught in this rut of thinking they just need the right test score, and they don't do anything. Therefore, they're worthless in the eyes of someone like me from an employment standpoint. Of course, they're human beings and they obviously have worth, but I don't want to hire them because they don't know how to do anything. And what the thing that struck me about you, and the reason I wanted to hire you, is as we had our initial interview, I could tell that you were the type of person that did things. You accomplished things. You didn't ask questions. You went out and did it. And that's why you got the job that you did, at least with me. I know that tell us about your journey, but I just wanted to talk about that because I think it's so important that people hear it's not about the test score anymore. Graduate already and do something so that you can talk about what you've done in an interview with an international company.
So to start with that question, I think one should always, if certain opportunities comes to you, you should always give it a try. You should never undermine yourself like you don't have the proper credentials, you might not crack it. Why should I go and meet it? Like what would happen? Like any opportunity, because when I met Troy, I had no idea that he was actually going to hire me. Because the information that I had was this guy is coming to India. He might.
Hey, I didn't know either, by the way.
So I got a small text from my old boss, like Troy is coming to India. Can you meet him for an hour or something? I said I will check it. So then I got Troy's number, and he's like, okay, so I am in Mumbai. I'm coming to Delhi. I would be there by 11 in the night. So can we meet next day? And I am like, I am going to Mumbai and my flight is 6 in the morning. So the time that we can meet is between 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. in the morning. And I am like...
That's quite an interview. Yeah.
Yeah. So most people would have said no, but I said I'm either ways going. I can always go a little early to the airport because I might meet somebody new and just have a good conversation. I think that is something that you should always be open for. You should not be open to conversation because you're going to gain something out of it, but you should just go there, have a conversation. You might just have a story of a life maybe. And that is what I'm going to share. So I met Troy 2 a.m. in the morning. We had a conversation for like 45 minutes. And then after an hour, he's like, would you like to work with us again? And I'm like, I'm not totally prepared because I'm going for an event and the kind of commitment that I have with the current organization, I would take at least another 30 days. And he's like, I'm in no hurry. Take your time. Think about it. These are the things that we want to do in India. Are you going to be prepared for it? And then let's catch up again after a month and then decide. So I got hired, like, if I have to say, I got hired like 4 in the morning. And then after that, I had a lot of time to kill. And then he had a flight in the morning. So I said, I have nowhere to go. I'm going to sleep on your couch. Because I said, I'm going to ask things because there is no harm in asking. Because if you would have said no, I would have went to the airport and maybe sat on a chair and might have done something. But again, I was tired as well. So I thought, why not ask? And I'm like, Troy, would you mind that if I sleep on your couch before I can catch my plane or something? And he's like, okay, I'm perfectly fine with it. So I think you need to ask. You need to have that conversation. I think most people fear of getting no as an answer, like something bad would happen. I think you should be happy of getting no. It's normal. I think saying no and hearing no both should be normalized. I think
Yeah.
people don't say that much. People get offended hearing that. I think it should be normal because I think in the partnership world there are many emails that I send out and I don't get a response. And I do the opposite. Whenever I have to say no, I make sure that I write a nice email saying that the idea interesting, but the current stage where my company is, my focus is, it doesn't make sense. But let's meet again in future. Maybe we will click again. But currently I have to say no to you. So I make that effort. I think in the long run that helps because keeping somebody in the air and just expecting that the other person will understand that you're saying no, I think doesn't make sense. So coming back to hiring, so this is how I suddenly got hired 3 a.m. in the night.
And then the rest
Right?
is history. We had
Rest is
yeah,
history.
amazing times.
So yeah, crazy. Like I called my mom 6 a.m. in the morning because they were checking whether I have boarded the plane or not, and mom and dad both are on the call. And like I met this guy, and he offered me a job, and they're like, "Did you apply for it?" I said I had done nothing. I got a message that I need to meet this guy because he want to do something in India. I met him, and then after an hour of conversation, he just offered me a job. And then dad is like, "What are you thinking?" I said, "I still have a month to think, but again, it's a happy experience." So I was just sharing that. So I think, yeah,
And now it's been
just
11 years that
yeah,
you've been, with this company. And I'll say that um, learning how to present yourself effectively is very, very important. And I would say things that struck me about you that allowed me to make the decision of making you an offer were, number one, very personable. You just have a great personality, and you talked about not just business but other things, so we were able to connect on that front. And then the second thing, as I said before, was just I could tell that you were a doer, that you did things. You didn't just have great credentials on paper. You accomplished things. And that's what I needed at the time, was someone that I could trust to just execute. And I'll say it was one of the best hiring decisions I've made in my career. And, what we were able to accomplish in India was absolutely spectacular.
yeah,
So that's what we need to do as people looking to get into these kind of positions is,
mhm,
and this is what we teach in some of our challenges and climbs, is how to present yourself in a compelling way and how to be personable in an interview, because in the international markets, that's so much more important than just the score or your diploma, right?
yeah,
So yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I want to add, guys, because I really like what you said. Um, so often we overestimate the risk. And there are actually very few things in life where stakes are really high. And we kind of trick ourselves into thinking that like the stakes are high all the time, especially when we are young. So like doing things that are, unorthodox, strange, like, and weird, and taking your chances and going somewhere at like 3 a.m., like you're not going to fall apart. It's not something that people usually do, have business meetings at like 3 a.m., but just like saying yes to things, and the worst case scenario, like it doesn't work out or you get a rejection, so what? But the
Yeah.
upside can be so disproportional because no one else is doing that. So I think that's such an important message to send out, saying just like, let's go, let's try different things, let's risk, and let's go out there. Worst thing we get is just like we learn something and we try something else.
That's so
yeah,
true. Well
Yeah,
said,
that what
absolutely.
Theodore.
speaks
That's
to
so
me.
true.
Yeah, that what speaks to me as well. Saying yes to the opportunities, because it's better. Even like me, if I don't have time or capacity to take a new project, I'd rather go and still see and meet people who offer me a job, and we will have this like good conversation, build new network, and maybe I can recommend someone else. Or sometimes happen this way that after like few months or even years we still like work together after that like conversation. So yeah, say yes. That's the advice.
So I think we're getting to the end of our conversation with you, Anirban. Time has flown. I love hearing your stories and just kind of where you've been and what you've done. The last question that we always like to end on is, what is the craziest experience that's ever happened to you, other than spending the night in a hotel, interviewing for a job? What is the craziest thing that's ever happened to you in business?
So this is the first interview with Evernote before Troy hired me for the second round of market development and everything. So I got this call from a colleague, a female colleague of mine, and she is much more on the finance side of these studies and everything, and I'm much more on the technical side. I'm good with electronics, so I think I was one of the few people who used to do training on Apples and everything. So at a certain point, all CEOs were given Apple laptops, but they didn't know how to use it. So I used to train them. So at the early stages. So she got a call and she's saying that I got a call from a recruiting firm and they're looking for a person who is good with Android, iPhone, Windows, the Mac. So they need that guy. So I recommended you. So expect a call. So I got the call, I went for the interview, and I'm all prepped up. So I did all the training in the night, reading all the books for Windows, Mac, because I'm expecting that kind of questions. I go there, and this guy, his name is Leon, and he sends me an email saying that I'm going to send you an email, just send a response to that. I get an email, and it simply says, how would you make a tea? Explain in 60 words.
How would you what? Make a tea?
Yeah, explain that in 60
Oh,
words.
make like drinking tea. I see. Yeah.
Drinking tea. Like, how would you make a tea? Explain that in 60 words. So the recruiter there, I went up to her and I told her, like, I think I got a wrong question and I think he was sending this to somebody else because this is a technical interview. I'm expecting that he's asking me different shortcuts or Windows or formatting things and doing something on an Android device. But this is, and the recruiter is also puzzled. She is like, okay, let me get back. And then she calls Leon in front of me on Skype and I can hear Leon saying, yeah, that is the question I asked him. Ask him to answer. And deep inside, I'm like, this guy is joking with me. He has already hired somebody. He doesn't want to waste my time. So he's asking me this stupid question. This doesn't make sense. So somehow I thought, okay, let's do it. So I just wrote it. Okay, like you take a pan, you heat it up, you put this and this, and that is how. So I did it. I went away. I came back home, told my family, like, crazy interview. I don't think they ever wanted me, but they don't know how to say no. So they had this stupid question. And then after a month, I got a call and they hired me. But then again, I was new, I never asked. Then we did the second round of hiring after 3 months. And then this girl who is supposed to be hired, she comes to me and she's like, sir, the person is asking me how to make tea. I came here for a technical interview. At that point of time, I asked Leon, like, Leon, what's this fascination with this question? Like, you hire people for a technical job and you ask them how to make tea. And then he's like, see, Anirban, we are working in a startup. Although we are hiring you for a technical job, but there are people who are going to ask you different things. And we want to see what is your approach for out of the box kind of thinking. I know your merits are good. I know that you know of Windows. I know you know about Android. You know about Apple. But in day-to-day life, if somebody is asking you a normal question, like, how's the weather in India? Do computers get affected the same way that it gets? So you should be able to communicate with that person rather than saying, okay, no, sir, I don't speak about this. I will only speak about how your computer is going to work. But you're going to have a conversation with them. You're going to tell him, okay, the weather is really hot here. I live in the northern part, so it's always hot. So you're going to have a conversation with
how to be a human, right?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, if you're human with a person who has a problem, half of the problem is solved there because you have a connect with that person. Like, you are connected with that person on a personal level. You understand, okay, I understand, sir, there's a problem. How's your life going? So that is the kind of conversation we want our executives to have. The technical knowledge is important, but to have a conversation is important. So I think that small thing hits you very hard. It's like I used to always say like, this guy, I don't know why it hired, but again, I was happy to be hired. But I think after 3 months, I got that clarity that talks a lot about it. So I think those kind of things, it hits you hard when you are like really early in your life with your career and everything, and you don't give it that much of a thought, and somebody tells you something of this kind. I think that's really an amazing experience to have.
Thank you. It's absolutely a beautiful story. I think actually there was more to that there, because a lot of the thing that you were supposed to be doing is explaining really simple, obvious stuff that seems like there's no point in explaining to you, to someone else, for whom that is absolutely not clear, etc. So by giving you this assignment, that kind of, that doesn't make sense, but you have to like walk step by step and guide them through this. It was actually a really smart way of like checking how you would do that. That's a wonderful exercise.
Yeah, and I'll say that's a common approach for Silicon Valley firms, especially, is asking crazy interview questions that don't seem to match with what you're hiring for or looking to become at that company. And it is all about out of the box thinking. We want thinkers and doers. Nothing else. Like that's what we need to measure up to. So as we do our challenges with interviews and stuff like that, we practice some of those questions that are kind of seemingly you don't know why it's being asked, but you have to really think about, okay, how do I answer this in a way that projects myself as someone who is a doer and a thinker? Those are the most important things. So yeah, very cool. That's great. Well, Anirban, it has been amazing talking to you. You and I need to catch up separately probably, and I need to get over to India hopefully soon, but COVID is causing a lot of problems in that plan. But thank you so much for spending the time with us. I really am amazed at just the career that you've been able to design, because in my mind, you're living the dream in India, right? You're working for the Silicon Valley company in India on your terms, which I think is awesome. And congratulations to you for that.
And thank you for that, because you hired me there.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. All right. Well, with that, we will sign off for Relevant Insights. I hope that this has been an interesting episode for everyone. Again, we talk with hiring managers, entrepreneurs, and interesting executives like Anirban that have designed their ideal career in the international markets. So tune in next time. We have some great people lined up for you. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Great to meet you. Bye.
Thank you.